So on Twitter, you can see two perspectives of the people. One group says that MacBook Neo is capable of far more things than people have expected it to be. And on the other hand, people are assuming that MacBook Neo is just like a Chromebook, but in the way Apple would make a Chromebook. Let's talk about it. So I've imagined the way if a person wanted to buy a MacBook, supposedly if he's starting with a MacBook and he wanted to take an experience of how macOS does at the first place. So he has two choices. If he wanted a pro level task, he might be going to the pro version of MacBook. If he do not want that pro kind of thing, video editing on all those, he'll go with Neo or Air. Let's just dig down onto the point that what a person should buy. Would it be the MacBook Pro, which is 2,000 plus bucks, or the MacBook Neo, which is $599. So the much more assumption thing related to the MacBook Pros and MacBook Neo is about memory. This has 8 gigabytes of memory and they have 16 gigabytes of starting memories. What would be the potential difference? So if you are a MacBook Neo guy and if you wanted to purchase MacBook Neo, there would be 8 gigabytes of RAM and that's it. So you might be thinking that, okay, MacBook Neo or macOS needs some sort of memory, so it will run into the bottleneck of the memory. No, it isn't, because so it uses the SSD of the system, which is 256 gigabytes, and then it just uses swap memory feature to use the speed of the SSD as the memory speed, and then making this SSD as memory and captivating some of the things like your web browsing, some sort of application memory which takes and run in background. So it would be swapping it to the SSD, and then SSD would work as RAM, but RAM would be also there. So near about, you can assume 10 gigabytes of RAM, you would be having 2 gigabytes of SSD and 8 gigabytes of this unified memory. But the thing is, that's not sufficient. If you are into that market, you are not dealing good enough, because 8 gigabytes of RAM is purely sufficient. It does not signify the true nature of MacBook. Just because few years ago, iPhones were come out of 4 gigabytes of RAM, till that time, the highest ever phone has gotten 12 gigabytes of RAM. But still, that 4 gigabytes of RAM feels much more faster with that 12, comparing that 12 gigabytes of RAM. Why was it? Because the Apple has making an ecosystem within the software and the hardware to compromise it in a way that both works perfectly fine for individual ones. So if you are considering MacBook Neo, having 8 gigabytes of RAM wouldn't be an issue, because Apple would have been integrating it in a way that it would work best, and it works best for the system as well as the applications which come in macOS. So there won't be any problem of memory if you are considering memory a problem. Throw back to the processor. This processor, single core, is capable enough to beat M1 in the single core performance. If you talk about multi-core, it's near about the same to the M1 level. Talking about the GPU cores, it's also same as of M1 chip. So this, if you're thinking that A18 Pro is not a good processor, it couldn't able to handle that macOS, or the stuff which you do on macOS, or some sort of editing, 4K editing, or any kind of, sort of FX, SX, it would work perfectly fine in all those things. There are a bunch of YouTube videos on which you can find that MacBook Neo, there's a stress test where people used to edit 4K videos, applying some of the SX as well as some of the FX, and it just works perfectly fine. Maybe the rendering time would be much more than that comparing with Pro. Definitely there's a huge gap. But if you're a college student who really this laptop targets, it's good to go. Now talking more about how this unified thing works. So Apple make bunch of these processors, and they can use this processor to make anything they want. So they made a new MacBook Neo, and because of their integration, it works perfectly fine. Now the main people of which MacBook is being targeted about, MacBook Neo is being targeted about, are most probably the students. Because if you are someone who is considering buying, if you are an adult, you are earning well, and if you are considering buying a laptop, why you will be recommending MacBook Neo to that person? What does he want? He wants a laptop to be working. Supposedly, if he is a coder, he would need a laptop to code. If he is an artist, he would need an iPad or a laptop to work fine for that artistic skills. If he's a web developer or any sort of thing, he would perfectly needs a high-end computer, not even the base MacBook Air. He won't consider MacBook Air, because the main priority of that person is a MacBook Pro, the pro tasks. So definitely they won't be choosing MacBook Neo. The MacBook Neo is particularly targeted for the students. That's why it's $499 for the baseline students. So it's perfectly targeting the students, the market where people are not used to macOS and they want to sprinkle some of their experience to macOS. So they are the ones who are buying this MacBook Neo, and for them this is particularly fine. They need to edit some sort of 4K videos. That's good enough. It would capable enough. They use some web browsing like Chrome browsing, some 24 tabs open, 25 tabs open. They'll be running perfectly fine. If they want some of the little podcast in the way, it will run perfectly fine. If they want some music development, it would also work perfectly fine. So this laptop is just made for the students. Moreover, people were talking about the screen size is a bit less. It's a 13-inch LED, 2408 times 1506 resolution. This has 500 nits peak brightness, 10-bit color, which is pretty good. There's a bezel all around, 1080p webcam, which is not fascinating but capable enough for video calls. And there's Wi-Fi 6. There's two USB Type-C. One is third version and one is second version. So the amount of data transfer speed would be allocated according to that. So the way battery has been designed for the MacBook Neo is that made a smaller battery for the MacBook Neo, but the chip is efficient enough to work for that smaller battery up to 16 or 20 hours if you're stretching that limit. So it just works perfectly fine. If you're, charging it with that 20-watt bricks come with that laptop, it would take near about 1 hour to charge, and then you could assume it to work for a whole day, emailing, web browsing, some sort of editing, and then you're back home with that 10 to 12% charge left. Now, if you are also someone who is likely to not particularly go for iPad OS, would rather advise the Mac OS, that is also for you, because there is nothing which iPad can do and this cannot. There are things which this can do, iPad cannot, but there aren't any way that iPad can do and this cannot. Everything can be done on this laptop. Now also, there's an assumption of this price bracket comparing this with a Windows laptop. Okay, you got a Windows laptop at that same price, $599. There are much more laptops which are capable enough to do multiple things. But the thing is, their build quality won't be like this MacBook Neo. Definitely there will be a plastic build. Their processor might be upwards a little. Means you could get i7 9th generation, i3 12th generation, i5 11th generation as well. That processor is good enough, capable enough, but that won't be allowing your system to work as fine as this MacBook Neo. Considering more things like, let's suppose, GPU. If you are someone who considered gaming, you can go for the gaming laptop or the Windows laptop. With that price point, you can get 2050 Ti graphics card, NVIDIA one. So you could go that for it. But if you're not someone who is gaming or into those gaming market, this MacBook is just for you. This MacBook Neo. You do not have to buy any others. You do not have to consider buying any other Windows laptop. Some also says that the Windows laptop would come with 16 gigabytes of RAM, sometimes 32 as well. But that won't work because integration of Apple would be much more fine than that of those things. So ultimately, this comes to overall an assumption that this laptop is just for someone who are students, who are writers. If you are someone who would do photography and casual photography, this is also for you. But if you are someone who is, pro-level video editing, not basic, pro-level video editing, gaming, or some sorts of 3D rendering, software development, this isn't for you. You can just do the normal coding thing, but not the peak line which you would think. So Apple has redefined this market, definitely. Earlier on, there were Chromebooks, which weren't capable enough at this price. The Windows laptop, which also weren't capable enough at this price bracket. But Apple has made one, and they are capable enough. So which color you are picking for this MacBook Neo? And until you purchase that, till the time, keep vibrating, just like us. Take care.